Philly Sports Jabronis. I'm Joe Dower with Zack Tertel. This is our fantasy football podcast for Week 3 of the 2024 NFL season. We're taking a new approach here to our podcasts, and that new approach is basically going to be answering 3 questions. Each one of us is going to ask the other 3 questions each. We're going to play ping pong, go back and forth, 1 question at a time, and that'll be that. That'll be our podcast. So I guess it's our 3 questions for Week 3. Zach, how you doing? I know your daily fantasy hit. What was it? Number 5 out of almost 500?
Yeah, that worked out really well for me. I had Chris Godwin, I had Malik Neighbors, I had a few other guys. It's funny, like the guys I paid up for that were more expensive were Derrick Henry and Amon-Ra St. Brown. They did well, but they weren't like the guys that carried me. It was like them. It was the Arizona defense it was like the cheapest in the league that week. It was a lot of the cheaper options that I had. So even Zach Ertz at tight end was super cheap. It got me like 12 points. So it was good. And then the 2 leagues I probably care most about, I am in first in one and last in the other. So it's just the way these things go, I guess. So.
Yeah,
it's definitely been an up and down first couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I guess for anyone listening, regardless of the type of league that you and I play in and our listeners play in, whether it's PPR, whether you have large rosters, whether you're in a super flex league, whatever iteration of your league has, I imagine everybody out there is dealing with multiple injuries to important players on their roster, which will be reflected in some of the questions that we have for one another tonight. All right, so Zach, to kick things off here, the first question I have for you is, given the injuries that are kind of rampant right now across the league and, of course, across fantasy football, focusing in on the Miami Dolphins, can we still start the Dolphins skill players that we have with Tua being out, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's crazy. Like, even these quarterback injuries, like I felt like someone in one of my leagues was saying this is like the worst they've ever seen it. And I was thinking the same thing about last year. Like, this is the worst we've ever seen it with the injuries. And it's like, maybe we have short memories. Maybe it's just the last 2 years have just been really bad. But yeah, it's like you didn't used to see that many injuries at quarterback. And now it's like there's been so many already. Like Jordan Love, week 1, now Tua, and there's probably a couple others that I'm not thinking about. Bryce Young maybe injured psyche mentally, but as far as go back to the Dolphins, I think so. Not like I've never been the biggest Tua fan, but so like maybe some of this is a little bit maybe there's a little bit of bias here with my answer here, but when he's been really excelling in their offense the last couple of years, like he's just been getting the ball out super quick. And so, maybe he's like very good at making decisions and knowing where to go with the ball, which we'll see if Skylar Thompson's able to do that. But to me, it's like, it's not a thing where they're relying on like a quarterback that's like amazing with the downfield passing and has a really strong arm and, make some of those tough throws. To me, it's like, hopefully they still see like, hey, let's just like real quick, get the ball in our playmakers' hands, the guys with all this speed, with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, with Devon Achane. And so maybe you can like knock them down a peg in terms of your expectations. Maybe Tyreek Hill, if he was like your number 1 going into the season, maybe he's not your number 1 right now, but he's still probably a top 5 to top 10 wide receiver. And I think Waddle, again, hopefully that they see, even if you bump him down some, if depending on your league, he's probably still like a wide receiver 3 at worst or a flex, and so I still think you're not benching him. Achane like has had the benefit of like he's been playing a lot more wide receiver now too. So like to me again, it's like the quick throws to him should still be there. There's no reason why they can't still do that stuff. So so I think all those 3 guys, I think those are like the 3 main guys you were probably playing. I don't know if there's anybody else really in that offense at this point. One of my 5 guys, of course, that I was talking about how I was all over this year, Raheem Mostert is already injured. So I don't think there's another running back that you're playing there. So to me, like lower your expectations maybe a little bit, but I'm still fine with throwing out my Dolphins week 1.
Yeah, of all the names there, the personally for me is I'm impacted with the play of Tyreek Hill, and he generally feels like somebody who is you got to play him. He's a must start regardless of any circumstance. But in the league that I have him, I'm actually 0-2 with a couple tough luck losses with a very deep wide receiver bench. So that the thought crossed my mind as we sit here now, and it's worth mentioning this podcast being recorded on Wednesday evening. In that league, I can start 3 wide receivers and 1 running back. So from that standpoint, I'm looking at it as Tyreek Hill probably only owes me, if I have to settle for this, running back 2 points. So hard to say no to him, and really, anyone else for to write him off entirely.
Seattle defense they're playing this week has been pretty solid this year. So again, maybe it's not the best week, but I can't imagine having any of those guys on my bench. And it's a thing where it's like definitely monitor it. Like maybe it is only Tyreek Hill, maybe Waddle does have to get bumped down, but for now at least I'm still fine with playing all these guys. All right, so my first question for you, I brought him up in terms of Bryce Young for the Panthers. He's being benched. Andy Dalton's now in at quarterback, and it's like you wonder, like, is this an upgrade now? It's hard to think it's a downgrade because you almost can't get worse than what they've been. So is it now time to, like, look at you talked about some of these injuries now going on. Is it now time to maybe start looking at some guys for Carolina? Like, are we actually starting to feel better about using some Panthers again?
Yeah, I'm kind of investing in Carolina this week, which I think generally speaking would be a bit of a scary thought, but not when you think about 2 things here. Number one, just the numerous injuries that have been occurring, right? At this point. And then number 2, when I say that I'm investing in Carolina Panthers, in some of my leagues, I'm in a position where I can at least put claims in for guys that probably are not available in most leagues, but in some leagues where I play with smaller rosters and no IR spots, dropping Panthers just became pretty common because of how poorly they were playing overall. So I'm actually attempting to acquire number 1, probably Deontay Johnson in the majority of my leagues where I have a need, right? So I'm not. He's not available. He's probably only available in actually 1 or 2 of my leagues tops still at this point. Some of my waiver runs don't actually happen until tomorrow morning, Thursday morning. So he's not available in a lot of leagues, and neither is Hubbard. But I am in play for both Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Johnson this week. And I'm not all that upset about it because the injuries are quite devastating, and I'm dealing with injuries to Walker, to Pacheco, to Debo. So there's a flex situation for me where a draft I was really happy with had Debo in my flex spot, and now he's not. So I feel somewhat relieved, as kind of scared as it might be to hear or for me to say, to be able to try to invest in Carolina this week as Andy Dalton comes off the bench. And this is a perfect example of where real life and fantasy can kind of be a little bit at odds. I'm sure Carolina fans are somewhat relieved to move on from Young for now. But I think, the relief that I have and relief that anyone else out there who might be able to invest in, particularly Johnson, if you're in a really bad way, probably does not mimic the real life relief. But before I move on, though, we mentioned Andy Dalton here a few times. In one league, I actually am picking him up.
Wow.
There's a clearly, it goes without being said, but I'll say it anyway. There's clearly a big disparity in what the quarterbacks that are available in that league. This is a budget league, so I did put a claim in last night for Derek Carr, who was heads and tails the highest point scorer available in that league. But as it turns out, and I put a fair offer in. It was almost 10% of the remaining budget. But a friend of mine who I'm going to be playing this week, and I didn't realize that till this morning when I was checking all the waiver action, put in 20% of his waiver to pick him up and really prevent me from getting him. Essentially, he had to be sleuthing like that, because he's got 5 quarterbacks now. That opens up a conversation that we don't have to have now, where there should probably be position limits for this league. But anyhow, I am picking up Andy Dalton, but at least I got him for $0, so I considered it an invest. I'm going to keep carrying on with that investment mentality. Yeah. So I am very likely going to be starting in 3 separate leagues: Hubbard, Johnson, and Dalton, and each one of them I feel actually kind of pretty good about it, because if Dalton in particular wasn't starting this week, not only would I not be able to have the option to take him in a spot that I kind of like against the Raiders, where he's once again kind of playing for his next job that he wants, whether it's in Carolina or elsewhere. I like the matchup. I'm happy to be able to invest in all 3 of them potentially, depending on how the waiver wire works out.
Yeah, I actually, in the league we're in together, Deontay Johnson was dropped and I picked him up. I have A.J. Brown, and he just missed a game and looks like he may miss another. And I also have Cooper Kupp in that same one. So I'm down like all of a sudden 2 top wide receivers, and I'm basically between starting Amari Cooper and Rome Odunze, and neither of them have been all that great. And so, I looked at Deontay Johnson and I thought, you know what, I could probably do worse here. I talked about that I had high hopes for him coming into this season. It's definitely not worked out, but I may end up starting him this week with all the injuries that I have.
And for the long term, even if you don't start him this week, he's now a long-term option again, assuming that Dalton comes in and plays at least well enough for fantasy purposes to make Johnson attractive. And and from that standpoint, Hubbard as well. In the league, and the league that I picked up Hubbard in, I also have Brooks. So now I feel like I've got myself kind of covered there.
They've just never been in games to the point where they could even run the ball. Like, I think they have like 28. I was looking. I think it was like 28 running back carries in 2 games total. Like, you don't know how they're going to split it up or how they might, because Miles Sanders has been involved. But is that because like they've been down in every game? Like, you just don't know at this point if like how they're going to use the running backs. Like, nothing. Like, if they can just stay in games, like, it could be completely different. So yeah, it's worth a shot. I wouldn't be excited about playing him, but he's definitely more of an option than he was probably this time last week.
Yeah, and to kind of complete things there, like Sanders, I didn't mention him, and that's because I didn't put in any claims for him. I don't own him. I didn't put any claims for him. And the other person I really didn't gravitate towards was Adam Thielen. So yeah, but certainly I still think that there's Panthers to be had this week that are valuable. And as the old fantasy football cliche goes, desperate times call for starting Carolina Panthers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, so moving on here, Zach, your second question that I have for you. This staying within the division. This and we mentioned Derek Carr here a little bit earlier. Is this Saints offense really for real?
Maybe not to this extent, because I think they've scored on almost every drive that they've had. But I mean, they have the new offensive coordinator, and really, I kind of like the options that they've. In terms of like Derek Carr, maybe he's not an every week starter, but I think he's playing well enough, and I like the guys around him enough, and the offense has been so much better with their new offensive coordinator that I feel like he's going to be usable, especially when we get the bye weeks. And if you have had an injury like Jordan Love or somebody like that, or maybe you drafted somebody like Caleb Williams, and that's really not working out. And you don't want to do any of that right now. So I think he's going to be usable in fantasy. But I like Olave. I think he's going to be somebody that's still going to stay on as like an every week starter. I think Rashid Shaheed. I actually was like worried going into the season that I was a little too high on him. Like looking at where I had him compared to other. To a lot of the sites out there and rankings that were out there. And, I didn't end up with them because I felt like, okay, I can wait because and there was somebody would maybe like scoop him up towards the end of the draft when I had already kind of picked all my wide receivers or something like that. But even Alvin Kamara, I have him in the league that we're in together. I feel really good about continuing. Like he was somebody when I waited a little bit for a second running back, he was somebody I ended up with, and I think he's going to end up being a good value. So like, not to this extent, but yeah, as far as like those guys all go, I think they're really going to be solid. They go against the Eagles this week. Hey, if they're playing like a defense any like they were in that last drive against the Falcons, I think you'll be just fine starting your Saints. They can't seem to get to the quarterback right now. So this week I say still start all of your Saints. I think there's a good chance there's a lot of points in that game on Sunday. So I think Derek Carr even is startable if you're able to get him, if you're able to pick him up, depending on like who else you have. Yeah, I don't know that he's an every week starter, but I think this. I think it's more for real than I think it is a mirage. I guess I'll put it that way.
I like a lot that you had to say there, especially beginning with the new offensive coordinator there, and was it Clint Kubiak? Because that even though Derek Carr surely is going to have his typical warts, and as you said, he can't be started every week, really. From where we sit right here, thinking long term, looking forward, it'd be hard to predict that someone is going to be starting him every week. So he, that's kind of the expectation of Derek Carr. He's going to have big games, not going to start him every week. Kamara, that guy who's a beast when he's healthy and when the team's competitive. And then, you mentioned Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. And, it's not that I'm certainly not enjoying this because of all the names that we just mentioned there. Olave is the only one that I actually own in multiple leagues. So the offense being for real has come at a cost individually for him. Like he still hasn't had his monster game yet, which I think is overall a carrot for the offense. But but I think that's
we were talking
that's
last
a big
week
indicator.
about whether we could
trust him or not.
Yeah.
And then so I just think the fact that they're winning and he's not having to dominate in any way, shape, or form is huge for that offense. And then a name that's not getting talked a whole lot about, but because he's dealing with some injury, of course, injury being the theme here. But the tight end, the new tight end that they brought in from the Raiders, Foster Moreau, when that guy's healthy, he could be really scary in that offense as far as the tight end position goes. With how lacking the tight end position has been here so far this year, someone who could definitely be scooped up off the waiver wire if he gets healthy in the next coming weeks. So yeah, definitely think the Saints offense is for real.
Yeah, Olave had 81 yards. We talked about it last week. It didn't do much against Carolina. They just dominated that game. But yeah, it was. I did not see the Saints putting it to Dallas. We were talking about the injuries. The next question we have here just is related to like there's been a lot of bad starts to the season and injuries and things like that. So like we do have to like dip more into players and teams that we might typically avoid. So just looking at like the sort of teams that haven't been doing so well, are there any of these like 0-2 teams that you think offer up some good lineup options, at least for this week while we're trying to figure out all these injuries?
Yeah, I do. Some yes, some no. Probably. And so as far as 0-2 teams go, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 of which are in the AFC South. So I guess the Houston Texans can start getting their bubbly ready. Yeah. But So in the South, the Titans, the Jaguars, and the Colts. In the AFC South, AFC North, Bengals and Ravens. And in the AFC West, the Broncos, So that's the AFC side, and then in the NFC side, it's the Giants, Rams, and Panthers, of course. So 3 on the NFC side. So what's that? 9 teams total. So some yes, I would say the majority no, but in particular, the first team that comes to mind is a team that shouldn't be 0-2 at this point for sure, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. And I have Burrow in one league. I have Moss in another, who I have not been playing yet, but I might be playing him this week due to injuries. And I think that's not the worst case scenario. But looking at their matchup, and as I go back into my very many tabs here, they're playing on Monday night this week, which inherently is something that I like. With the matchup that they have, and they're playing host to the Commanders, so I am not going to shy away from really too many Bengals this week, and primarily I am going to continue to roll with Burrow, and I am going to be playing Moss a little bit here and there, and again, like with the injuries that have been mounting, I'm not all that concerned. Moss's average is nothing really to write home about, but he's still getting the ball predominantly in that backfield, or dominantly in that backfield, and I feel like he's primed to have a nice fantasy game here on Monday night, and same thing with Burrow. So I would say I'm gravitating towards Bengals. I am and I guess you can't really turn away from any Ravens. I almost feel like they're an elephant in the room for this conversation, but certainly not leaving any Ravens left behind this week. As far as the Titans go, I am going to be most likely plugging Calvin Ridley into a flex. This is going to be the first time I've had to rely on him this week, and again, due to injuries, but it's something that I'm not too concerned about. And then really, I think the only other team that's worth really diving into, I'd be inclined to say the Rams, but they make up for a lot of the injuries that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So the only other team I'm really inclined to talk about is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I'm not going to go as far as to say that they shouldn't be 0-2, but I'm still going to play ETN with confidence, and in a league where I really did wait a bit to draft a quarterback, I am going to continue right now to stick with Trevor Lawrence. And a big reason for that is, again, because he's playing Monday night as well. So we got 2 Monday night games here. It's in Buffalo, which is not anything I'm excited about necessarily, but I tend to, we're early in the season, and Lawrence has not been reliable fantasy-wise by any stretch of the imagination. But where I got him in the drafts that I took him, I think I own him in 2 leagues. It was very late, and while I thought he was going to be off to a better start than this, I can justify, I think, starting him based on the value at which I got him, as opposed to diving on the waiver wire. So just with it being this early in the season, the 2 rosters that I own him on, I still have some depth guys that I didn't want to drop, to pick up another quarterback, whether it be Baker Mayfield or even Derek Carr. I didn't put claims in for any of those guys the last 2 weeks here. So I will continue to start Trevor Lawrence. And then with the Colts, now they're playing the Bears, but they are at home, and Richardson is he took some lumps last week, and he may have a tough go at it this week, but I'm still going to start him in one league, and I'm debating. We talked a lot about Alec Pierce last week, and he had another big week this week, which we kind of know, though. As we talked about last week, why we didn't have great long-term aspirations for him, and those things are still probably in play, and there's still downs to come back, and things with that roster that are going to fill out that maybe means that Pierce won't continue to do this. I don't like to use the term regression, but there still could be a regression coming. There are, I'm sure, instances where where Pierce could be an option as well. But certainly thinking more along the lines of Bengals and Ravens and I guess Jaguars as far as where I'm going with 0-2 teams.
Yeah, Pierce proved me wrong a little bit. I was talking down on him about last week, and he followed it up with another touchdown this week. I'm with you in terms of like some of those teams that I think I'm still, I'm especially the Bengals. I think I was really encouraged by what I saw against the Chiefs, even though they lost that game. So I think going against Washington on one of those Monday night games, which, by the way, the two Monday night games, but they're only separated by like 45 minutes start. Like, why can't we just stagger them a little bit more so we can actually watch both games? I don't really understand.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, other I'd love to be in the room because it's got to come down somehow to advertising.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, but anyway, I do think the Bengals will put up a lot of points. The other guy in the Titans, I've been pretty impressed by what I've seen from Tony Pollard as well.
For sure.
I didn't end up. He burned me last year, so that was one of those like I saw his name every time I saw his name come up, I couldn't do it. So I don't have him anywhere, but I'm like, it's like he's burning me twice now because I avoided him this year. It's like he's getting me all over again. So every time I see him, I'm just annoyed by all that. But I think he's having a really good year too.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him because I will be starting him in one league at least, and yeah, would certainly not have really. There's no reason to have any reservations to this point about playing him, especially because it looks like Tajay Spears is going to be very possibly out this week. So, okay, so my third question for you is, and we've dropped some, we've already dropped the name here a few times, but with what's going on in Kansas City and Pacheco, do you feel like that we can start any of the Chiefs running backs?
I kind of want to, as far as starting this week, I kind of want to give it a week. Mm-hmm. I did pick up Carson Steele in one league, but I kind of want to just see how this goes. I don't know if he's somebody that's going to catch very many passes. I'm worried that they might spread the ball around too much between Samaje Perine. They signed Kareem Hunt. They always seem to do these like weird little plays around the goal line. Like they just threw it to an offensive lineman last week. Like they just seem to get like really cute. So it's not even like you pick them up if you get the Chiefs starting running back, you're going to be like, yes, he's going to be getting touchdowns. Like you can't even really feel good about that. So for me, I don't mind picking them up, but I think you really got to be in a rough spot right now. Like just looking at the running backs out there, I think most teams have at least one like pretty established starter that I would rather play above like Steele or any of the other Chiefs running backs. But like, I think both of them should probably be owned right now in most leagues. And then you just like see what happens this week and then see if they kind of like gain your trust, I guess, for as we head into the following weeks.
Yeah, we're kind of speaking the same language there again, especially you start with Steele, and I did pick him up in a league or two, and as I was making my waiver selections or bids last night for the leagues that refresh on Wednesday morning, I was thinking about it, especially as you're reading that Hunt was visiting, and you thought, okay, he's probably not visiting just for show, and even though there was some drama there with his departure, as aggressive as the Chiefs are, and as much as they feel like they can manage problems like Hunt had, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm still gonna put in for Steele, and I didn't put any claims in for Hunt yet because I want it to be a more wait and see approach. And this early in the season, again, there's some depth that I have to my bench, these injuries notwithstanding, that caused me to not really put in a ton of claims this week, but I certainly was active. And I had to think long and hard though on some of the drops that I did make to put in for Steele. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest attraction here is just that the team is so good. Like it's anybody who comes into that offense, it's worth taking a flyer on. especially for I think in one league the player that I dropped was Jaleel McLaughlin, who is someone I thought I was getting kind of a steal in multiple drafts this year, and maybe that will tend to be the case. But it's kind of sort of what you said about Pollard earlier, but to a little bit of a lesser degree because Pollard is higher ADP. But I feel like and McLaughlin hasn't played a ton of games in the NFL, but with how much he was kind of in and out of the equation last year, I kind of feel like when I pick him up and I say, okay, I'm stashing him, he never gets an opportunity, and so he kind of burns me from not picking up somebody else. When I play him, it doesn't work out, and so like I've been wrestling with do I hold on to him, because in the few games that he has started or had a significant number of carries, he's done really well. It's just becoming impossible to tell when he's going to get the football. So he kind of tortures me a little bit from a waiver wire standpoint. Do I drop him for somebody or not? But yeah, so that's kind of the approach that I took. I was in on Steele a little bit there, but I don't anticipate starting him this week, and just trying to take a wait and see approach. And he'll probably be pretty. Hopefully I don't have to deal with this. But if he doesn't get a lot of carries, I'll probably keep him in a position in my mind where it's like, okay, if there's another hot commodity to get out there, he could be on the chopping block. But certainly want to take the chance on him because of how dynamic that offense is and how Coach Reed and everybody else seems to just get the best out of their guys, whoever they are. Yeah,
it's a situation where like none of us, we like you said, because of the offense, like as much as I like we want to try to, like, if there is going to be a next Pacheco, like who is actually getting that much work, who like dominates the carries, like we want to make sure we can get that guy. I do think there's a very good chance there is no Pacheco, that they spread it out among multiple guys. But just in case, like you make the ad, but you have to realize that like there's no way we could possibly know at this point what Andy Reid plans to do and like what the offense plans to do with these running backs in terms of how many carries they get. Like, so there's a difference between saying, yes, we think you should pick one up, and yes, we think you should definitely start them in week 3, because I think the wait and see approach makes a lot of sense. And so you want to speculate and hope that you might have that guy, but realize that like there's a good chance that there is no guy. So
right,
that's kind of where I'm at with it. And yeah, but like the league I picked him up, Carson Steele, I have Kamara and James Cook, and then James Conner in my flex. But I'm one injury away. Like my other running backs are Tyler Algier and Raheem Mostert. Like I'm one injury away from next week being like, okay, do I have to play Carson Steele? And so like that would be the week that like if they split it up, I don't know if I feel that good about playing him next week, because like what am I going to do? Get like a guy that gets 8 carries for the Chiefs and hope he gets a touchdown? Doesn't seem like he's going to catch a lot of balls. So it's like this week should tell us a lot against Atlanta.
Absolutely.
So so my last question, we've been talking about all these injuries, and we're trying to figure out where we're going to fill, where we're going to fill in some of these spots and who's going to fill in these spots. So, so can any of these like injury spots be filled by players from their own teams, like we just talked about with Pacheco, or should we be looking elsewhere at other teams when we're trying to fill in for some of these injuries?
Okay, let me start with the teams that I think you can find replacement with guys in the same uniform. All right, so within the same team. Sometimes the taking a risk on somebody on the waiver wire is fraught with potential negative consequences, and sometimes you just got to go with the next guy up in real life. I feel a little bit more strongly about Cam Akers in Houston if Joe Mixon is out, and I will add to that list of guys that I feel more strongly about going to the wide receiver position, Juwan Jennings in San Fran. We mentioned Deebo Samuel earlier. Those are 2 guys that I would feel pretty confident in if if your next best option is to just go to the waiver wire, and again, because I feel like when all is said and done, normally you're gonna have less luck trying to plug in somebody from the waiver wire on another team just because they're being hyped up as a top waiver wire guy to go for because there's fantasy content all over the place. Hence, us here talking about this kind of stuff, and not just going up with the human next guy up option. So to a little bit of a lesser extent, though, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Justin Jefferson. But I wouldn't be afraid if Jefferson. It doesn't look like Jefferson's going to be ruled out at this point, but if he were to be ruled out, I certainly wouldn't shy away from Jalen Naylor in Minnesota. And I think are there any other injuries that come to mind that I haven't covered yet? I think the Rams injuries have been ongoing, so it's almost like those guys are probably already owned. But yeah, I would certainly continue the trend of starting next man up Rams if you've got those guys already or can get them. But is there anyone that I'm missing that comes to your mind?
Yeah, Demarcus Robinson for the Rams was the one that did come to mind, and at this point, it looks like he's available in about half of leagues still on ESPN. So I wonder about that offense, like between not having many options, wide receivers left, and the offensive line being banged up. It's like I almost feel like we just want to maybe avoid that offense right now. There's honestly, it's like you named probably the ones that are the closest options in terms of like who I might feel okay about. I'm just hoping at this point that like maybe there's other players on other teams that you can find on if you need to go to waivers beyond those, like for any of the injuries. Like we don't want to like Jordan Mason. That one already happened with McCaffrey. If you got him, I think that was the best example of next man up. Hopefully replacing your guy, but yeah, there's not a lot of others that really come to mind for me, like where it's like the backup is filling in for your player and you want to pick him up.
There you have it for Zack Tertel. I'm Joe Dara. Thanks for listening. This has been Jabronis Week 3 Fantasy Football Podcast for the 2024 NFL season. We will be back to chat with you all next week. And for those listening, if you have any questions that you'd like to send in for consideration for us to discuss, drop a comment on our Twitter or Facebook page or send an email to info@phillysportsjabronis.com.